Welcome back to the Black Shoe Diaries YouTube channel. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Crowder, and I'm joined by the managing editor at Black Shoe Diaries, Jarrett. Thanks for joining me tonight for what should be a fun episode, previewing Penn State football, really.
Absolutely. Yep. Going to do the top 10 players. And I just have to say, we've been doing this for several years now. And I feel like each year we're getting to the point where it gets harder and harder to compile these lists because you're just leaving out some guys that are just dudes, guys that are going to be, really excel in the field and probably have NFL careers ahead of them. So we'll get more into that. But I'm just to say it's really nice to put together these top 10s and kind of realize how much talent Penn State has to work with compared to, some previous seasons.
Yeah, some of those years, like when I joined BSD, I joined for the 2016 season. So fortunately, as that season went along, it was like, okay, Penn State's back to being good. But yeah, some of those, early Franklin years, I'm sure.
Even 2016. I mean, just considering going into it, that was a surprise season, but going into it, I'm getting a guess. We can probably go find those lists, but we were probably struggling once we got to 7, 8 or so. I'm like, okay, are we really going to put this guy on here? But we need to have 10.
So that is actually something I want to ask you. And funny enough, I mean, I've been doing this almost for 10 years as well. And we always do get comments about basically what exactly is the list, because when we do it after the season as well, and it's much more of an obvious, this is how they performed. Whereas for these preseason lists that we do, a lot of it is what they have done in the past, but we are trying to kind of predict what they're going to do in 2025 or the following season, correct?
Yes, it's basically how you expect them to perform over the upcoming season, and you're just basically, you just said, projecting where they will be at the end of the year. So we're not really going into future potential, long-term potential, I should say, NFL status, anything like that. We're just saying, when we look back at this season, who are going to be the top 10 players, and then we just kind of work to project that.
Yeah, it's always fun. Back in the day when we had Blake Gillikin, you would have your, some people would put, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. I mean, I'm probably never going to put a punter. Maybe you could talk me into a kicker if they're really good, but so yeah, a little bit of it is open for interpretation, and that's kind of what makes the list fun. So this year, I think it was generally, I feel like the top 5 or 6 was pretty straightforward, and we'll start with some honorable mentions, some people who did not make our list. So just as a reminder, this is not Jared and I's list combined. This is the whole BSD staff. Well, as we talk through the players, we'll kind of tell you where we had them, if we had these guys in our top 10, if we didn't. Some of the honorable mention guys I do want to mention are 3 players that either Jared had in his top 10 or I had in my top 10. So I had Elliott Washington and Drew Shellen in my top 10. Jared, you had Anthony Donko in your top 10. I think all 3 of those guys, if we talk about previous seasons, were almost considered, would have been considered locks to make the top 10, but that's just kind of where Penn State's at this point, that you have Drew Shellen, who, could potentially be a all Big Ten left tackle. You have Elliott Washington, who, has looked really good. You have Anthony Donko, who, very well might be the best offensive lineman on this team. I think you can make an argument for that. So kind of where were you with Anthony Donko in particular on why you had him in your top 10?
Yeah, I had him at number 8. I just was so impressed with him last year, first year as a full-time starter, and what really kind of, made me put him higher in the rankings was just his run blocking. He's just one of those guys that, you can put a hat on the hat and he can push the guy across him, to just basically open up a hole for him. We just saw a lot of them last year. I thought he was an exceptional run blocker. You did notice a bit, not a terrible drop off after he missed about the second half of the season after the Washington game. But things didn't. I don't know if things came quite as easily. So, he's fully healthy. He's back. Full participant in camp, and I think he's going to have a tremendous season. No matter how things shake out with the starting lineup.
It is pretty crazy. Even 20 years ago, and granted, we don't know for sure what Anthony Donko's injury was. We know he hurt his knee. We know it was a long-term injury. We connect the dots there, but the fact that, let's just say it was a torn ACL, the fact that he tore his ACL in November, allegedly, or maybe towards ACL in November, and the fact that he is, a full participant or a regular participant at practice really shows you just, medically where we're at, that you can tear an ACL now and basically be back by the beginning.
Yeah, and I don't know how back your Penn State fandom goes, but like I think the best example of that is Aaron Harris, who was a standout running back
Yeah,
along with Curtis Enos. He tore his ACL and he was just never quite the same. And now guys can tear their ACL, and not only, like, to your point, they're back sooner, but sometimes, like, you can't even tell they were injured.
yeah.
It's like there was like no rust; they're just back and ready to go. So yeah, it's nice to see that it's not quite the either career-ending or at least career-damaging injury it once was, considering how common it was.
Certainly so. So, like I said, I had Elliot Washington and Drew Shellen. Actually had them at 9 and 10 on my list. So the rest of the 8 all made the top 10. Elliot Washington, we made this list in April, so it was after all those winter workouts. The winter workout thing was great, like the fact that he got all 6 or whatever it was. But even going back to last season, he was kind of that third corner behind Jalen Kimber and AJ Harris. He went down with some sort of injury, I believe, in the Washington game as well, and eventually did work his way back, but he was never fully like back as cornerback 3. He kind of then just was in that rotation with a Davion Collins and Zion Tracy and guys like that. So excited to see what a fully healthy Elliot Washington can do. And Drew Shellen, man, I feel like, I guess it's a testament to him as a left tackle, the fact that he plays left tackle, which is generally speaking like the most notable of the offensive line positions. And I think if you went up to any Penn State fan and you said Drew Shellen, they would either say, oh yeah, he's a pretty good player, or they wouldn't know who he is, which I feel like, all things considered, I mean, other than being like an All-American, is about the best thing that you can say about an offensive lineman. So really excited about Drew Shellen and what he can do at left tackle.
Yeah, left tackle is one of those positions, almost kind of like cornerback.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That if people don't know your name, sometimes that can be a really good thing. I mean, he's doing his job. He's protecting Aller. He's protecting Aller's blind side. He's been doing this for a while, so he's got plenty of experience. Yeah, he probably doesn't get quite the credit that he deserves. I think it's just people kind of gotten used to him, and they have those expectations for him. And but yeah, I mean, he's obviously a standout, and won't be surprised if he is in the top 10 at the end of the season. But I could also say that I'll get about 6-7 offensive linemen, surprisingly enough.
Some other guys that made our honorable mention, or I should say, they got votes. That's basically what we're saying here. Dom DeLuca got a vote. Shout out Dom DeLuca. Devontae Ross, the transfer from Troy, wide receiver, got a vote. Khalil Dinkins got a couple votes. Cooper Cousins got some votes as well. So any of those guys stick out to you as somebody who could really rise when we do the after season version of this?
I would go with out of those. I mean, none of those guys would surprise me if they're in the top 10. But I'd go with Devontae Ross. I would say, just really impressed with what he did at Troy. I like how he fits with Kotelnicki's offense. Kotelnicki was really missing a very productive slot receiver, and now he's got Ross and Pena to play around with. Kind of add different wrinkles, to add a new dimension to the offense that they were pretty much lacking last year. I don't think that's much of a bold statement to make, but yeah, I think Ross could really do some exciting things for the offense, and then the punt return game as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's really been settled, and the one thing I will say about Ross that got me the most excited about him when he first transferred, I looked at a stat sheet, because sometimes you get someone from Troy, and where do those numbers come from? But he had his best, I don't know if it was his best, but at least one of his best games against Iowa, which always has a great defense, standouts in the secondary. So that really has me excited for him. And from what I've heard from practice, I guess he's looked really good. So think he could definitely take a big jump.
Yeah, wide receiver is going to be interesting with Kyron Hudson, who didn't get a vote in this, but I think it's definitely someone that I could see jumping into this top 10 as well. And this will kind of take us to number 10, because one of the other guys that got some votes, Khalil Dinkins, I think it's someone who could jump into this top 10 as well. And it's kind of fitting that at number 10, we actually had a tie between Luke Reynolds, tight end, and Trevor Pena, a transfer wide receiver as well. So I just find it interesting, kind of just like I was saying, like, if you ask me who led Penn State in receptions, I don't know. I think I would say Kyron Hudson right now. But that's I could see an argument for Pena. I could see an argument for Devontae Ross. maybe not necessarily Luke Reynolds is like the leading like reception getter, but I could definitely see him being tight end one or the de facto tight end one. I think him and Dinkins will play pretty closely together. But what are you looking at from, and you can start us off with however, let's start with Luke Reynolds. What are you expecting out of Luke Reynolds? Because I know a lot of the talk right now has kind of shifted back to the Khalil Dinkins side of things, but what does Luke Reynolds offer as far as a tight end at Penn State?
So if you go back a few years ago, early in the Franklin era, Luke Reynolds is going to be playing a lot as a true freshman. They're going to be depending on him a lot, probably, a bit earlier than that may would have been beneficial for him. But he got to sit behind Dinkins and obviously Tyler Warren last year, kind of work his way into games. He did get quite a few meaningful snaps, even though he may not have been a really regular player. But I mean, he came along really well as a true freshman. Obviously, deserved to be on the field, and he made I can't recall his catch total. But I mean, he made some really incredible highlight reel catches. So he's a pretty complete tight end. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the leading receiver among the tight ends this season, because he's just athletic. I think Kotelnicki's going to be able to find a way to create mismatches with him. And I think I may even mention this in one of the earlier episodes, but the thing that really stuck out to me about that got me excited for Reynolds before he even stepped foot on campus was when he was at the elite camps his senior year of high school. I would hear that he was outperforming everyone, that he was like, you'd watch and you say, okay, that's the guy that's really gonna be an incredible player. So when you're going up against other 5-star prospects and you're regularly beating them out and making plays against them, you always got a lot of potential. And I think we got a small slice of that last year, a little sneak peek, but I think this year he's going to be on the field quite a bit more, and he's going to have a lot more opportunities. And I think he's definitely absolutely going to make the most of them.
Yeah. 9 receptions last year for 111 yards. Played a lot though. And I, you kind of mentioned him as a recruiting prospect, was a guy that was a 5-star on some sites and was looked at one point was a quarterback recruit, like so many of Penn State's great tight ends. Decided to switch to tight end and was kind of looked at as a, more of a receiving tight end, not someone that was going to necessarily be a blocker. But you saw last year, I mean, he was a guy who enrolled early, put on the weight, and was more than happy to do the little things. When Andrew Rappelier went down, Khalil Dinkins was a little banged up to begin the season. So Reynolds stepped right in, realized that, hey, Tyler Warren is going to be the receiving tight end here. It's not going to be me, and was a fine blocker. I don't think that he was Isaac Smolko out there, as a blocker, but certainly did his part. And I think, against the Kent States and against I think Purdue, he had a touchdown. What you kind of saw from him flash-wise was somebody who that, yes, can make tough contested catches, but once he makes the catch, is someone who can do a lot of damage with the ball in his hands. And I think that's like where Tyler Warren as a senior last year, where he kind of took that step forward, where it's one thing to get open and it's to make tough catches, and another thing to make that catch and then, make guys miss and rack up those yak yards. So I think Luke Reynolds is somebody that could do that. So I'm excited to see the battle between Reynolds and Dinkins this year, because it's going to be a fun one.
And just to your point about his blocking abilities, that's just such a tremendous sign, because as a true freshman, he's proving himself as an effective blocker. At 19, your body's you're not physically developed completely yet. You're going to get a lot stronger over the next year or two. Have better technique, learn how to block with better leverage, that type of stuff. So obviously, a very promising start for him.
Yeah. And how about Trevor Pena coming from Syracuse, right? Played in a wide open air raid offense at Syracuse. That isn't necessarily going to be the case at Penn State. That is going to be an offense that is still going to be predicated on the running game. But what are you expecting out of Trevor Pena? Why is he in our top 10?
So I will start off by saying I think there's a very, very tiny chance that he's going to replicate his numbers from last year. That's just, by design with the offense he's going to be coming from. I looked up, and Kyle McCord rather had 200 more pass attempts than Allard did last year. So, and this sounds kind of weird to say, but Allard may have even less pass attempts this year, considering what were our thoughts on the line and the returning running backs. But yeah, last year he had 84 catches, 941 yards, 9 touchdowns. I had another touchdown on the ground. So obviously this is the most obvious statement of the preseason, but he was a very productive guy. The receivers needed production, so someone who went out there at a power 4 level and just went out there and proved he could perform. Make a lot of different types of catches, whether it's contested. He seems like a guy that you can kind of throw in there and kind of he can handle the entire route tree and just really be a valuable part of the offense that's been missing the last few years.
Just a guy that can get open. Penn State's issues at wide receivers, and I know we have mentioned this before, it's never necessarily been these past couple of years like a lack of athletes. Like Amari Evans' problem wasn't that he wasn't a good athlete. Trey Wallace's problem wasn't that he was a bad athlete.
Both are amazing athletes.
Yeah, right. They're both very good athletes. So even for Trevor Pena, right, even if he's not going to be a guy that runs in the 4.3s and he's a little, on the smaller side of things at 5'10", 186, but guy gets open, makes catches, makes tough catches, good body control. Another guy that can gets the ball in his hands and is able to create after the catch. So yeah, excited to see. If you had to pick between the receivers, Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, I know you said that you had Devontae Ross in your top 10, but part of that, right, is his like big play ability. Who would you say leads the wide receivers in receptions? I'm kind of leaning Kyron Hudson recently, just because I think he's just kind of be like Drew's, like, it's 3rd and 5, put Kyron Hudson on a slant, he's going to get open. I think it's going to be close between all three, and that's probably right. The correct answer is that they're all going to be kind of close. But if you had to bet right now, who do you think leads the receivers in receptions?
I might actually go Devontae Ross.
Okay, yeah.
I just like his playmaking ability and just seems like he can do a little bit of everything. He's a guy that can, handle the short routes, handle screens, and see what he can do with his legs after the catch. So I could see him, having some of those games where, he might have 11 catches for, 110 yards or something like that, average like right around 10 yards a play. But I could see him being used as a lot, as the announcers like to say, basically a run. When it's a short bubble screen or something of that nature. So I could see him just racking up a lot of stats there. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if any of the three.
I would love to see some touch passes. Sorry, like on jet sweeps, like the old Dwayne Haskins like touch pass that technically counts as a pass, but it was really a run. Get Ross going through the side. It's basically a run play anyway. So you're right. You're still playing to Penn State strengths, but yet we're giving Drew some of those passing yards, some of those passing touchdowns all of a sudden, trying to boost his, I don't want to say Heisman campaign, because I think it's going to be really hard to get through the Heisman just with Penn State's running game. But hey, we're still going to be here for it. Before we move on to the rest of our top 10, let me point out, please, you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to it. Helps us a lot. Like this video if you can as well. That helps as well with getting the video out there, so that if somebody searches Penn State football, this video will pop up. So make sure that you like the video. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube. At last check, I think we're at 211 subscribers. So let's get that up. I would love to be at 250 by the time the season starts, and at some point we got to hit 409 at some point during the season. That is that's my
we'll do an emergency episode one.
Emergency podcast once we hit 409. Please subscribe, do your part to get to 409. Success with honor. Here we go. All right, moving on. So we had Luke Reynolds and Trevor Pena at 10. Now we're going to kind of get into, I don't want to not to take anything away from like Luke Reynolds or Trevor Pena, but right, kind of more of Penn State's core guys, or guys that were core guys last year. Number 9, we have Tony Rojas, which is someone that I did not have in my top 10. Jared, I believe you did have him in your top 10. I go back and forth every day with Tony Rojas, where I love the athleticism. I loved him as a recruit. I think when he's attacking line of scrimmage, he's really fantastic, and I'm interested to see how he does now that he's healthy, right? He doesn't have the shoulder injury anymore, knock on wood. But as much as that I'm sure that affected him, I didn't necessarily love the angles that he always took on plays. It's just kind of just his overall football IQ and instincts, maybe not as high as it could have been, but he was just a true sophomore last year. So what was your line of thinking
So I had Rojas right at 9, where he ended up ultimately. I'm firmly in the camp of Rojas's injury issues. Playing through injuries last year impacted his performance. It's no mystery that he missed a lot of tackles last year, but when you're dealing with a obvious shoulder injury where he's wearing this big shoulder brace throughout the year, I think it's not only going to impact your ability to tackle, obviously as a linebacker, but sometimes perhaps the angles you take. He probably has something in the back of his mind where he's trying to make adjustments on the fly so he can hit him with his good shoulder, or just trying to hit him in a way that he feels comfortable with. And probably I think that really resulted in some of his poor angles last year. So I think we're going to see huge improvement from him. I thought he played much better towards the end of the year when he seemed like he was feeling a little bit healthier, whether that was health wise or just learning from experience. But he really impressed me towards the end of the year. And then just looking back at his freshman year, he really made the most of his opportunities. He was one of those guys. He kind of reminded me of like Anthony Zettle's freshman year before he broke out, where he wasn't a starter, but every time he was on the field, like he just jumped off the screen. He was out there making plays, and you could just see his potential. So I really think he's going to take a huge leap this year. And just really be a standout linebacker for Penn State, and really make him a name for himself around the Big Ten this year compared to how he performed last year.
Yeah, he didn't play a ton his freshman year, but did get some run in all 13 games and had 4 tackles for loss. Compare that to last year, where he plays in all 16 games as a full-fledged starter, and he only had 6 tackles for loss. So clearly something wasn't fully there last year with Rojas, whatever that is, whether that's injury, whether that's just lack of experience. Both those things should hopefully be improved. So yeah, I mean, we will see. And also the change from Tom Allen to Jim Knowles' defense, I think, is going to play a part as well. So we will see what happens with Tony Rojas. I think linebacker is overall in a pretty good spot with Rojas and Amari Campbell, like all things considered, and Dom DeLuca as well. Certainly want to give Dom DeLuca a shout out. All things considered, if you have those 3 guys and Anthony Specca and Keon Wiley, I think you feel pretty good about linebacker, even though none of those guys maybe are, Dan Connor or Sean Lee. You feel pretty good about linebacker. Number 8, Vega Ione, offensive lineman, big Samoan guy. 1 point was committed to Washington. Fortunately, Penn State was able to flip him, and right away was just one of those guys where it's like, oh yeah, it turns out that being really big and really athletic helps in football. So I know one of the things that Vega has done this offseason has slimmed down a little bit. I believe it was Nick Dawkins and Landon Tangwell talking about it, that he's gotten a little trim, which trim for him means instead of being at like 350, he's like 330, 335. But he's our highest ranked offensive lineman. We both had him on our list. I'm checking where he was on mine. I had him at number 7. And Jarrett, you had him at number 10. So why is Vega a guy that made, both of our top 10s and really was a consensus top 10 guy for our staff?
Yeah, I mean, he was just, a standout guard. I mean, obviously, I think he made a name for himself by pulling and going in motion.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, that it's rare for an offensive lineman to make a highlight reel play. What else when something crazy doesn't happen, like a fumble recovery and picking up and running with it or something like that, but just on the standard play. But he really proved himself as an effective guard, as interior lineman. He really did, like Donka. I thought he did a great job run blocking last year, and really was effective using his size and speed to take people out of the play. You had mentioned his size, but he can move so well for a guy that's big. And I'm kind of curious to see, because I think when he committed, wasn't he like 360 or so?
Yeah,
I want to say he ran like a 4. I could be off here, but I swear like he ran like a 4.940 or something. Yeah. So I just remember being immediately very intrigued by him. And he's actually, I'm pretty certain it's the only time I've pulled up a recruiting video, like a highlight reel of a Penn State commit, and had my wife watch it, just because I was like, you need to watch this guy. Yeah. And we watched some of his we just sat there and watched some of his high school highlights where he's, 2-3 times bigger than these guys and just completely blowing them up. And it was quite irritating to watch. But yeah, he definitely made a name for himself last year. And I think, I think you can make an argument across the line about who's the best lineman, who's got the most All-American potential. But, going to season, Vega's definitely the biggest name for good reason too.
Yeah, no, you raised a good point about offensive line and just, right, if you polled 100 different Penn State fans, who's the best offensive lineman on the team, or who do you think is, going to be an All-American or make first team All-Big Ten, I think you could get a bunch of different answers from, Drew Shelton, from myself, to obviously Vega, to even some Cooper Cousins loves. I believe CBS Sports had Nick Dawkins as second team All-American, preseason All-American, which it seems a little bit high, but certainly, Nick Dawkins certainly proved himself very well at center last year. Yeah. So yeah,
having an extremely experienced center is just so valuable. Yeah. The guy up there calling, making calls and kind of anchoring the line and leading the way in a lot of different ways. So I wouldn't, he's another guy I wouldn't be shocked if he's a All-American come season's end, even though you may not have quite the hype, heading into it.
Yeah, no, and I think it just says a lot about the offensive line that this is basically looked at as a top 5 offensive line in the country, one of the best that Penn State's had in certainly the James Franklin era, but even the 21st century. And the fact that our highest ranked guy is number 8 on our top 10 list, because you could just make so many arguments for all these guys that who I just mentioned. So,
and that was one of the things that made this list so hard this year to put together, is because I had 2 linemen on my list, Donka and Ione, but you could have made the argument for so many others, but then at the same time, you don't say, I don't want to have this list of just 5 or 6 offensive linemen, try to squeeze a few other guys in. So
no, there's truly an argument for any of them.
Absolutely.
Like we said before, Cooper Cousins got some votes, Drew Shelton got some votes. So Donko, obviously, and Vega too. So Penn State's offensive line in a good spot. Excited to see what Vega can do if he can come just a little bit more nimble. He moved extremely well for a guy his size, but kind of take his game to the next level. Jarrett, are we in the trust tree right now? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't care about the Vega motion thing. I don't think it's a cute little. It's right doing against UCLA, and let's break it against Nova. Let's watch him hit some 5'11", 220-pound linebacker from that went to Downingtown West or something and used to play at Westchester and decided, hey, I'm going to spend my last year at Nova. That's fine. That's funny. He hit him. Let's not break it out against Ohio State. I think it's just unless you're actually going to toss the ball to Vega, there's no sense in lining him up in the slot and then bringing him in. Yes, he's a good mover. Yes, he has good feet. But most offensive linemen are right. They're stationary for a reason. There's a reason that you don't see that very often. So,
he's tremendous. Yeah, he's tremendously athletic for his size, but you do have to kind of wonder, okay, by the time he runs across the field, how much gas is he going to have left for this play here? Is he really going to be able to explode and really, push a guy across the field here? Or if you're doing it over and over again,
Yeah, well.
And to your point about him doing it against Ohio State, I think he went in motion 3 times in the infamous goal line stand. 3 of the 4 plays he was in motion. So
that
is one thing. And I sorry to go off on a tangent here, but that's one thing I will say about Kotelnicki's offense last year. I didn't quite get is sometimes they kind of stuck with these gimmicks a little bit too long. The Notre Dame game in the Orange Bowl, I don't know how many times they had Warren line up in the Wildcat and then motion out. And in the fourth quarter, you're seeing for I swear the 25th time. It's I think they've adjusted. Let's just get our offense out there and execute.
And that's the thing with Vega, putting him in the slot and then motioning him in. It's confusion when you first do it. If it's the middle of October and you haven't ran it in 3 weeks and whatever insert random Big Ten team hasn't seen it and they're freaking out, and then it works. When you do it against Ohio State at that point in the season, they're ready for that. And if you're not going to toss it to him when he's in the slot, or even more importantly than instead of running a screen pass over to Vega, to have someone come in motion like that, the other side of that coming in motion, right? The reason that you do it with running backs or tight ends is there's the threat that they're going to get the ball, that they're going to go into the flat, that they're going to fake a block and continue to go. Ohio State knew that Vega was not going to go in the flat, and even if he was, it was, hey, good luck. Throw the ball to him, and if you beat us on that, by all means, or tie the game, I should say, because it wouldn't necessarily have beaten them. But that's my only thing. And when Penn State has such good tight ends anyway, like Khalil Dinkins, Luke Reynolds, like why not run it with a guy like that? But I'm sure, right, if we brought Andy Kolnicki on, he would probably make me look like an idiot. And fully
he absolutely would make us look dumb for suggesting, But I don't think we're gonna see it too often this year, especially in big moments. But I do hope, like, a couple home games here and there when Penn State's playing with a nice lead, or just, it's obvious they're gonna pull away. They'll do it just for just for kicks and giggles and just a hat tip to the fans who obviously appreciate that.
Certainly so. Going defensively, and these next three players will all be on defense. So this is a nice little segue. Safety, Sakee Wheatley. So Penn State, I don't want to say lose a lot at safety, but just going off of last year, right? They went in the season with KJ Winston and Jalen Reed. Winston goes down pretty early. Wheatley comes in, and all of a sudden he's a guy. He would have played a lot anyway, just as that third safety, being that Penn State kind of plays a lot of 5 secondary players anyway, and we'll see even more of that this year. But Wheatley was fully entrenched into the defense once Winston went down, and did very well overall, I would say, and was one of those guys that I think you can point to. The player that he was in September and the player that he was during the playoff run were, I don't say 2 completely different players, because it wasn't like Sakee Wheatley was getting picked on in September or early in the season, but a guy that got better as the season went along, and now is the veteran of the secondary and certainly the veteran of the safety unit. I think big things were expected of him, and that's why he's in the top 10. What are you kind of looking for from Wheatley this year?
Well, I'll just take a step back quickly on his improvements, since you had mentioned that. But Franklin had mentioned this at least a couple times, probably more so in his press conferences about Wheatley, that after the 2023 season ended, he saw his playing time decrease, and it kind of sounded like he was on the verge of just being one of those guys who just wasn't going to pan out, or possibly just, hitting the transfer portal and looking to move down to the MAC or something like that. And Franklin mentioned him and some of the staff had some really difficult conversations with him, just telling him this is what you need to do to get better. You're not there yet. You're going to need to put a lot of work into this. And they said, to his credit, he did absolutely everything and more they could have asked of him. So, that's just such a great sign that, not only did he put in the work to get better, but that just shows he has the work ethic and the coachability to continue to improve and build upon what he did last year. But to your point, he really progressed throughout the season. And I'm really thankful that he's back, because Penn State needs that experience as safety this year. I think they got some talented guys around Wheatley, but no one quite with his experience to kind of lead the way with that position group. So, he obviously ended the season with his best game of the year by far. Had 16 tackles against Notre Dame, interception, I want to say a fumble recovery or forced fumble. He had a huge game against Boise State as well in the previous round. So, he's a guy that just continued to get better and better, and seems like he really kind of came into his own, and just kind of it was like everything kind of clicked into place, where he started seeing the whole field and kind of knew how to anticipate plays, and his productivity really backed that up. So I think we'll see an even better version of Wheatley this year. And one of those guys, we've talked about this with a few different guys, but one of the guys in defense who's got some serious All-American potential.
Certainly, yeah. Extremely productive player last year. 96 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and 1 forced fumble. So, right, a guy that really, was just all over the place, making plays
all over the field for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens this year. I think safety, as we saw with Ohio State, right, and it's not to compare him, Sakee Wheatley, to Caleb Downs, because I don't think that he is Caleb Downs, but you kind of saw what Ohio State's defense could be when you have a high-end level safety with someone like Downs. And if Wheatley can be, even 75% of that player in Jim Knowles' defense here, that certainly will help things for Penn State. So Zakee Wheatley coming in at 7. Sticking with the defense, we have Zane Durant at number 6, which I will be honest with you. I had Zane Durant 6 as well in my rankings. This was back in April. This was April 28th at 9:08 p.m. that I submitted mine. I would probably put Durant, I think, at least 4th, and I could even make an argument for 3rd and maybe even 2nd. He's one of those guys as the offseason has gone along. I've kind of just thought about him more, and I think he's in for a really, really big season.
I couldn't agree more. I actually did have him number 3 on my list.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, just watching him, I mean, 23, he had a really good season, but last year, Penn State had a lot of defensive tackles returning. They really had a nice rotation, to the point that Hakeem Beamon quit the team about midseason because I'm assuming he wasn't getting enough snaps.
Yeah,
he was a pretty talented guy too. But with all that talent returning, they had at least a couple 6-year seniors, but Durant was the one that really led the way. I thought that really kind of broke out, that showed how disruptive he can be. I mean, he's just so strong and such a great first step. So that combination just makes things so difficult for the offensive line, because he can easily, get past his man and blow up a play before it can even get off the ground. Whether it's hitting the running back as soon as he gets the ball, getting the quarterback quickly. He's just a very dangerous player in the interior of the line, and that just when you have someone that's disruptive right there in the middle of everything, I mean, that just makes the whole defense so much better. And the other thing about him is that offenses really do have to pay attention to him, and if you're putting 2, maybe even 3 guys on him, that's freeing up so many other players behind him to get to the ball and make plays. So he's going to be one of those guys who not only, I think he'll pop off the screen at times, and he'll obviously be a standout player, but he's going to be one of those guys that when you go back and look at the film, there's going to be plays where other guys around him are making big plays, and you realize, oh, well, Durant made that possible. So totally, all aboard the Zane Durant hype train. Totally agree with you that you could put him as a top 3 player on this team.
One of the things about Zane when he was a prospect, and despite the fact that he was like a lower 4-star, high 3-star, depending upon the site, but I think overall he was looked at, weirdly enough, along with Abdul Carter and KJ Winston in the class, who are kind of in that similar low 4-star range. But I think for the most part, Penn State fans and recruitniks kind of looked at them as higher end guys, despite those rankings. One of the things that I said, though, and I'm reading a quote from BlackShoeDiaries.com, make sure you're checking out the website, but our Meet the Class article that we do on every prospect that signs with Penn State, I said, Durant will have to prove that he keeps his quickness and twitch at around 285 pounds while having enough strength to hold up in the run. That was the big question with Zane back then, was that if he was playing at 260 in high school, can he add 20 pounds and keep that quick twitch and quickness that he had? Well, now he's listed at 294. He showed last year that he can clearly hold up, strength wise and size wise, and now he's only gotten bigger and has seemingly kept that, that freak athleticism. So yeah, he's answered all of those questions and was extreme. Another guy that was super productive last year, 11 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. I think he's someone who, he could see that his tackle for loss numbers creep up over 15.
Absolutely.
Really see those sack numbers go up to, 5, if not higher than that, which as an interior defensive lineman, like those are,
I'll take that.
Yeah, nothing to sneeze at. So certainly all-American level type guy. So yeah, I too am on that Zane Durant hype train, and wish I would have had him ranked higher. But as the offseason goes along, things fluctuate. So last guy defensively. Well, I shouldn't say last guy because we do have one more defensive guy. But before we get to our top 4, we have AJ Harris, cornerback. So originally, Georgia player, spent 1 year at Georgia and then transferred to Penn State last offseason. He comes in, quickly establishes himself as, one of Penn State's starting cornerbacks, and then really established himself as one of the better cornerbacks in the Big Ten and the country. Didn't necessarily have gaudy stats. I believe he only had 1 interception, but kind of like, was a lockdown corner and now finds himself in the top 10 of our top 10 rankings.
Yeah, I remember not quite mid-season, but thinking that, I was really impressed with what I saw out of the Davian Collins and Jalen Kimber. And thinking, Harris isn't doing as much as I thought he would, as a really, highly recruited guy coming out of Georgia.
Yeah.
And then just kind of realize, well, he's doing his job and shutting down his man, and they're not looking his way a whole lot. So, he's kind of one of those cornerbacks that you may not see a whole lot out of, but that's because, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do and just taking the opposing offense's best receiver out of the game. So when you're really able to limit the offense like that, that's just creates a tremendous amount of value for the defense. Yeah, he did have I was a little upset that his one pick six, he made that one brilliant interception, took it to the house, and I can't remember who.
Zion Tracy.
Was it okay? Yeah, I didn't recall, and I was like, well, I just won't call. I guess I just won't have to call it this person.
The hustle that Zion Tracy had on that play so that he could get that block in the back. I mean, it honestly has to be commended. Like when they were looking at the film, like the following day, I imagine that the coaches had to at least be like, hey, really appreciate you like full on sprinting to get into this play, but just to shove the guy in the back, it was just the most blatant and unnecessary block in the back of all time. But
yeah, I'll tell you, I cannot wait to see AJ Harris against Jeremiah Smith. I may have to eat those words because Jeremiah Smith is a freakishly talented player. I think I'm probably a little more higher on him than you are based off of one of our previous conversations, but that should be a really fun matchup to watch those two go at it.
I was on another Penn State podcast YouTube show, the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast with Zach Sako, and we talked about the Penn State Ohio State matchup, and that was like one of the questions about Jeremiah Smith, like how do you stop him? And do you remember in 2023 when Ohio State obviously had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Penn State decided, hey, Kalen King, you got him one-on-one, mirror him all across the field, doesn't matter, field boundary, and didn't work out. Did not work out. So
Nope.
We'll see that happens with AJ Harris. I like to think that, as good as AJ Harris is, just in football inherently, the wide receiver, the fact that they know the play, they have the one up. So we'll see what happens if whenever Penn State does.
And just as a quick aside, just since we were talking about that AJ Harris pick six earlier in the year,
Yep.
The Illinois game. I swear the last 2 years there has been an inordinate amount of big plays that were called back on some type of holding penalty or clip or something like that. Maybe it's just me, but I swear like it got to the point where every time like Penn State would make a big play, like I wouldn't even like react or anything because I would just be like I'd just be waiting to see like the yellow flag pop up on the screen. So
it's funny you say that because I feel like when I was a kid, I never had like it never felt like there was a big play that ever got brought back. And like now I know what you're saying because anytime like something happens, I like wait a second. Oh, okay, we're good.
Okay, good. Now I can celebrate a little bit, like 5 seconds, like after the play ends, at least. Yeah.
I don't know if you're a soccer fan, but soccer is very much that way as well with offsides.
I was going to say I'm not I'm more of a casual. I'm not a hardcore soccer fan, but I do enjoy watching sometimes here and there, especially if I'm with someone who's really enthusiastic soccer fan. But yeah, that's the one thing that frustrates me is all you're watching a whole game and you see this incredible play unfold and someone hits a goal. Then boom, offsides. Not gonna count.
And they always now they're like taught to basically always like let it play through because they can usually check with like VAR or whatever it's called. So it's like I legitimately feels like 75% of the goals that are scored, you just like truly have no idea. And then you also have like the defender that's raising their hand up saying that was offsides. Like no matter what, doesn't matter. So just throwing that out there. But anyway, so yes. AJ Harris in our top 5, one of the best corners in the nation. Now we go to, I mean, you did have Zane Durant, but in what you said, you had him number 3, right?
I had Durant number 3, correct.
All right. So our top 4, none of these are going to be too surprising to people. We did do number 4 today on Black Shoe Diaries, which was Kaytron Allen. So one of the running backs. I mean, what can be said about Kaytron Allen? Came into Penn State and basically right away showed that he was a consistent running back, a guy that, okay, doesn't necessarily have home run speed, isn't going to make like a ton of guys miss, but someone that you can give the ball to. He's going to get you between 3 to 7 yards on most carries, and he's basically has done that his entire year from his first snaps against Purdue on that weird opening Thursday night game that Penn State got to play to, I mean, last year against Notre Dame. Like, he's always just been a consistent, it's 3rd and 3, give it to Katron, has good vision, has good power. If you try to just tackle him with one arm, he's going to run through you. So what are your thoughts on Katron Allen, and knowing that he had a healthy offseason for the first time in a while, didn't have to do any surgeries or didn't have to rehab anything from the previous season, could be a full participant in winter workouts and spring practice?
Yeah, I think you just summed it up when you said his vision and power. Those are what make him special. He really sees the field and kind of knows how to cut. He may not have the breakaway speed, but he knows what angles to take to maximize, the most of every run, where, other running backs may get stopped for no gain or 1 yard, and he can somehow, weave his way for 5 or 6 and just kind of keep churning out yards, keep drives alive. So, the thing about Katron that I recall mostly from last year was towards the end of the regular season, I was a little concerned about him because I don't know if it was fatigue. He was battling some nagging injuries, but he had a stretch of some pretty poor games where it looked like he could barely make the line of scrimmage. So I'm not certain, we'll just chalk that up to maybe some nagging injury we didn't know about, or just the fatigue of the season, whatever the case may be.
It was Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. So the last regular season games, he had 26 carries for 64 yards. So that was 2.5 yards per carry. If I do remember correctly, in the Purdue game, he didn't play at all in the second half. So I think that there was some sort of injury in there.
Yeah. And I was a little concerned because you see that probably with running backs more than any other position. Sometimes it's at the college level, sometimes in the pros, but some guys will just hit a wall where they'll be really good, really effective running backs, and all of a sudden it's just like they just lose it, where it's just like you don't quite have that burst that kind of, helped you compete at that level, whatever the case may be. So I was kind of starting to wonder, I wonder if we saw his best days are behind him as a running back. And then we got to the season, and then he just had an unbelievable run towards the end, especially in the playoffs. So, just the way he ended the last year. And like you said, this is his first truly healthy offseason. So, it's just nice to have him in that. Know he spent the whole offseason in the weight room, working on different things, and his whole, a pretty complete back. He's a good blocker, but just kind of honing that.
The deer are back.
Oh, nice.
Let's go. The deer are back.
Yeah. Good thing I didn't turn that bush yet. But he lost my train of thought there. But
sorry.
You're totally good.
I had to call it out.
But yeah, just that's why I was saying that he's a pretty complete back, and just knowing that he could spend the offseason honing his skill set, and just the way he ended the season last year. I'm just, obviously I think, all Penn State fans are very excited to see what he can do this year. And just, I think the other thing too, with both him and Singleton, is just that extra year of experience that it's really going to help how they see the field. And they're going to know if the offensive line can open up holes for them, they're going to know how to, whether it's be patient, wait for their blocks, they're going to know when to cut, how to cut, that type of thing. So,
new running back coach as well, Stan Drain. Not that Juwan Sider was obviously very good at his job, and not to take anything away from Sider, but I do think that there is a benefit to getting kind of a new perspective, a new point of view in there, kind of just new ideas on how to be a running back. Because yes, running back coach is never going to be like an offensive line coach or a quarterback coach or some of those positions that are I don't want to say more important or more technical, but a little bit more, the coaching has more of an impact in it, but there's still certainly so many intricacies of being a running back. And I think someone like Stan Drain, who's worked with a ton of different guys from Ezekiel Elliott to even going back to his Villanova days with Bryant Westbrook, I think that he has an interesting perspective and knowledge that he can pass on to those guys and give them a new way of things. So yeah, certainly excited to see what Katron can do. Nicknamed Fat Man because of how big he was at birth, but there's a reason that Fat Man name stuck with him. So hopefully off-season healthy means that he could, stay in shape, get a little trimmed up, slim down just a little bit, just because I think that he is like a naturally powerful guy that he doesn't need to be 225. He doesn't need to be 230. I think that if he's in that 215 area right now, he's listed on Penn State's roster at 217, that's kind of going to be his happy spot.
Yeah,
Of
and he
having,
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't necessarily look like a power back.
yeah,
He doesn't look like he's going to run the way he does. But man, he can really lower his shoulder and just get those legs churning and really drag people for those few extra yards. Which like I was saying, just makes a huge difference when it's helping. Instead of a 3rd and 7, you got a 3rd and 3. Because he's fighting for extra yardage, or he's able to convert some short yard situations and keep the chains moving, keep the offense on the field.
Before we get to our top 3, make sure that you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Where is the YouTube channel? How can you subscribe to it? I have great news for you. You're on it right now. You're literally watching the YouTube video. That means that you can subscribe to it. Subscribe. It doesn't do really anything for you other than, yes, it will let you know that we're whenever we go live or when we post a new video, you'll get a little notification in the top right corner of your YouTube page. Will let you know that we posted something. But it's not like signing up for a ton of, you're not going to get emailed 700 different times from the BSD YouTube account every single day. It's not going to annoy you. It's really not going to do that much for you, but it's going to do a ton for us as far as getting our name out there and helping us kind of grow this channel. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps us a ton, and make sure that you're liking this video as well. Let's get into our top 3. I'm sure everyone can, you know who's in the top 3, but what order do we have this in? Number 3, the quarterback, QB1 himself, Drew Aller. Jarrett, what are our thoughts on Drew?
So I'll just start off
with out of a guy and for national college football fans. I don't think so much for Penn State fans. Obviously, he has his detractors, but I think most people like Drew. So thoughts on Drew?
Yeah. Obviously, body and arm of an NFL quarterback for sure. He's got your classic drop back passer, huge arm. He's shown this since his freshman year, and he showed more and more last year that he can make. He can make throws that I think there's a lot of NFL quarterbacks that can't right now. So definitely has all the tools. I will tell you that whenever Big Ten Media Days was a few weeks ago, I was listening to some of the coverage while I was walking my dog one day and heard his interview. And they asked the first question was about, how is he spending his off season? What's he focusing on? The first thing he said was footwork. And he went in this long rant about how he's working on his footwork. And when he said footwork, I about started jumping for joy, like in the middle of my walk, just because that was, to me, that was the one thing that was holding him back from being, All-American Heisman candidate, being the best, or at least one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. Is sometimes he would just rush throws. He wouldn't get his feet set. He would make some incredible, like I was saying, NFL level throws that not a lot of guys can. But then you'd have a 3rd and 6, and he'd sail the ball, well over someone's head or way off to the side, and just kind of be all over the place. So I think, working on the footwork, the mechanics, I think that's going to come with experience, where, kind of becomes more your standard mind frame, your muscle memory. And on top of that, and I do think the obvious thing about Aller that he needs to improve on is a performance in big games. I thought he did a tremendous job against Oregon, but Notre Dame, Ohio State, and then looking back at his first year as a starter, obviously he struggled against the best defenses. I think a lot of that too is more of a mental thing, where I think he's coming out a little too fired up, probably not focusing on his mechanics. That Notre Dame game was rough. That the first half especially, he kind of found his rhythm in the second half a bit, but man, he was just all over the place the first half. And I keep going back to one play that kind of haunts me. If it haunts me, I'm sure it really haunts him. But early in the game, when Penn State had a great chance to go 14-0, and Singleton, Notre Dame blue coverage, Singleton's completely wide open. He throws the ball way behind him. Penn State ends up settling for a field goal, which, obviously turned out to be a pretty huge turn of events when you look back at it. And not to pick on him, but obviously that interception at the very end, which was very uncharacteristic of him. But I will say, when you get to someone of Drew's, talent and ability, and as driven as he is, that's really gonna just fuel a fire for him. And I'm sure that really just motivated him to just a whole new level this offseason to be, the best quarterback he can be, to play to the best of his ability, and to have I don't know if I'd call it a breakout season, more of like a breakthrough season where he's really honing his game and doing some things that he just wasn't able to get done the last 2 years.
Yeah, as we've said, he's right. The offense probably just isn't going to be suited for him to have those gaudy numbers, to have like you said, like the breakout season. But I actually really like what you said there with like breaking through, because I Penn State doesn't need him to win the Heisman. Penn State doesn't need him to even be the number one pick in the draft. What they need is for him to be a little bit more consistent and to just basically take that next step. And that's not like the next step to even necessarily being like an elite quarterback. It's just right now, I think he's a good quarterback. Mm-hmm. Can he get a little bit better? Can he be a very good quarterback? Can he be a little bit more consistent? You mentioned footwork. I know like one of the beauties of Drew is like, he doesn't even have to step into a throw to make it, 50 yards. And you even see on deep passes, he almost has a tendency to throw off his back foot, to be falling back as he's doing it, because it's so effortless for him to, I have Amari Evans on a post 45 yards down the field. Like, I don't even have to step into this. I can just lob this like willy-nilly, like it's you're at Haluba on Wednesday, like an easy throw. It's like he said, improving on that footwork, stepping into throws, kind of understanding your throwing motion more, understanding, touch, where on the field to put touch, when to not have touch, when to fire in, when not to fire it in. So just a small things as a quarterback. I think that he can get there. It really does like make me laugh in a way when I see like national pundits talk about him, like Christian Hackenberg 2.0, or even like Anthony Morelli. Like maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid. Like maybe I fully am like blue and white goggles, but like I think Drew's good. Like I really do. Like this is not Morelli. This is not the feeling with Hack, especially towards the end. Like, okay, freshman year Hack, yes, we all were drinking the Kool-Aid with that, but I don't think it's like we went into Hack's junior season or during his junior season, we were like, this guy's good. This like that was just not the case, and I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's a Kool-Aid. I remember both of those eras very well. Aller is much better quarterback than either. Hackenberg, you can kind of make the argument because the line was just so pathetic. I hate to be that negative about them, but I mean they broke the record for most sacks allowed, the Big Ten back-to-back years. So. I guess that's not entirely on him, but I think Aller is clearly, head and shoulders above either of those two. And I think that comparison is just, a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And just, I think maybe people who think that maybe have too high of expectations where, they think this guy's just going to go in there and be, some Heisman level quarterback from the get-go.
Yeah, I just don't think that like the step that Penn State needs him to take is as large as some people act. Like, you can go back to last year, man. Like, okay, he didn't play well against Notre Dame, like at all. You're not going to find a Penn State fan that will say he played well against Notre Dame. Penn State very easily could have won that game. Penn State could have been Ohio State, like in that next game. Like, so this idea of Drew needs to take a massive step to be a national championship quarterback, I just don't buy. I just don't buy.
Yeah, he needs to clean up a few things with his mechanics, I think. The experience is going to help. Being the second year of Colton Nicky's offense is really going to be a huge help. His first year as a starter where he's returning to the same offense. And also, we've discussed the receivers a bit already, but just having 3 effective receivers and just having a slot receiver that you can depend on, I think is going to make a world of difference for him. I will say something I'm going to be looking for in the first 3 games. I know there's not a lot of excitement about who Penn State be lining up against those 3 games, but something I really, really hope to see is they just really work on the passing game and just have Aller build rapport with those three new receivers, as well as some of the younger guys who are going to play a bigger role this year. But I'd really love to see, it's not like they're going to have to go out there and throw 50 passes a game to win any of those or anything. But, if you feel that, and a lot of people do, Penn State can just kind of roll the ball out there and just go out there and win pretty heavily. You know, in a way, I hate to say this, but you know, it's almost like if you're going to treat it as an exhibition game in a way, then use it to get the fine tune the passing game and get those receivers now are on the same page and just kind of build that trust, build that rapport, that chemistry for the rest of the season.
Definitely. And that was, I mean, oddly enough, even going back to Drew's sophomore season, his first year starting in 2023, like one of my big annoyances back then was that Penn State, although the offense was putting up points going into that Ohio State game, like it was clearly non-explosive offense.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh, they convert on third down, right? You get them to 3rd and 4, and we get to 3rd and 4, and then they convert from there. But it was like, hey, you're going to need more than you know, this slow trickling the ball down the field. Like, you need these explosive plays. You need to put Drew in those situations so that when he goes to Ohio State, that this is not the first time. And then against Ohio State, he has to throw the ball 42 times. And I understand that, right? That was Penn State's really first time trailing in a game. So obviously a game that you're going to be trailing is going to be a game where you're going to throw more. But the idea of, hey, Drew, you're only going to throw, you know, whatever it is, 28 times against Illinois, but then against Ohio State, we're going to drop you back on the majority of plays. Like, that just doesn't line up. So same thing this season with this, you know, the Novas and the FIUs and the Nevadas. Yes, get Singleton his good stats, get Katron his stats, make sure the running game is in a good place. But yeah, it's preseason.
And one final thought on Drew for me. Last year, I thought his leadership ability just really skyrocketed. He just seemed so much more vocal, almost to the point. I remember the Minnesota game where Franklin kind of had to get down a knee and kind of talk eye to eye, you know, get eye to eye, kind of calm him down a bit because he was just getting so emotional. But that was just such a huge difference from his first year as a starter, where he just seemed really, you know, just kind of meek out there. Like he was like uncomfortable, like I don't want to speak for him, but almost like kind of just from watching, almost kind of felt like he wasn't certain if he belonged out there or not, you know. And last year everything just changed from a mental standpoint for him. So I think he's especially this year, now his third year, I think he'll be very comfortable as a leader. And just be a lot more comfortable in his offense, just a lot more comfortable in his abilities as a quarterback. So like you're saying, doesn't need to be Joe Burrow at LSU this year or anything like that, but you know, I think we'll see more, not necessarily big plays because he's always produced big plays, but just more consistency from him. And yeah, I just think, you know, we could see really big things from Drew this year. Just see him turn a corner just by cleaning up a few things.
Just taking the next step, the same way between 2022 and 2023, he took a step, same type of step. So, all right, we could spend the next hour talking about Drew, I think. So let's go on to number 2, defensive end. Going back to the defense, Deni, Dennis, Sutton. Another guy kind of similar to, we talked about Siki Wheelie and Katron Allen, guys that as the postseason came last season and the playoffs came last season, somebody who really stepped up. Deni was one of those guys as well. He was somebody that, similar to Katron, struggled with some injuries in the middle of the year. I know he had hurt his groin at Wisconsin and then that wasn't fully used for a couple of weeks. A guy that has and had all the talent in the world, 6'5", 265, 270 pounds, a great athlete, is going to be, you know, a guy that when he goes to the combine is going to, you know, just, I don't want to say break records, but right, something that's going to just put up some stupid numbers. Who is he going to be this year? Because I have seen a lot of talk about him being the next in line defensive end. We have a number 2 for a reason, and this is being very picky, but I question, like, is he Abdul Carter? Is he Chop Robinson? I don't know. And those are different types of defensive ends, to be fair, right? Abdul and Chop are, you know, in the 250 area. Deni obviously has a lot more size to him, but is he someone that can have 12, 13, 14 sacks, or is he going to be a little bit lower than that?
I believe so. I actually had him number 1 on my list. I've always loved his physical ability. I mean, he's just a freak with his size and his explosiveness and speed. You know, I think we've seen him gradually get better. You know, his freshman year, he got some decent playing time. You know, sophomore year, he made some big plays here and there. He made that huge play against Indiana when things really weren't looking too great. And last year we saw him kind of like Wheatley, kind of get better as the season went on. And also, I don't believe he missed any time, but he was injured for part of the season midway through, where he was on I think from Ohio State for a few weeks after that. He had a snaps limited, so he wasn't out there as regularly. And not only was he wasn't getting the snaps, but I'm sure whatever the injury was kind of slowing him down a bit. But you saw the end of the season, he just went on such a tear and was just really getting to the point where he was unblockable in the postseason against Boise State. He was doing all kinds of stuff, and Notre Dame, I think, was probably I'd have to look at his numbers. I want to say that was his most productive game. At least it felt like his most impactful game. Obviously had that crazy interception, which was one of the best plays I've ever seen by a defensive lineman. But yeah, he was just really in the backfield all night long against a good Notre Dame offensive line. So I just think, like you said, kind of considering what he's going to do at the combine this upcoming year, I was under the impression he was probably going to declare at the end of the season, go to the combine, be a first-round draft pick. So when you see a guy like with that ability coming back and just the progress, the gradual progress and improvement, I think some people thought maybe he's a 5-star. He's got all the amazing physicality that he's just going to blow the doors off the place from his freshman year as soon as he stepped in the field. It didn't quite turn out that way, but it's been a gradual progress, but he's shown steady improvement. And when guys do that, it's obvious, kind of like, again, to compare him to Wheatley, but when you see a player, gradually improve across the course of the season, for 3 years now, he'll be heading his fourth. But, that just tells you this guy's got an incredible work ethic. He's very coachable. He's doing everything he can to be a better player and have a bigger impact for the team. So I think with his trajectory, I do think, I could see him getting, 12, 13, 14 sacks this year. Definitely would not be surprised to see him as a first-team All-American at the end of the year.
Yeah, certainly a guy that, like you're saying, has gotten better every single season. Had a tremendous year last year, 8.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, I believe. So certainly has the chance to up those numbers. I'm just not quite as high on him from like a pure pass rushing sack perspective. I don't know if he's someone that, like I said, is going to get like the 12, 13 type sack thing, but certainly, one of the very best defensive ends in the country. And, you mentioned just the work ethic and that's like the fun thing about this Penn State team. And there's so many expectations and hype surrounding it, but just as Penn State fans, this is a really good group, especially the leaders to root for, from Drew to Deny to Catron to Nick Singleton to Key Wheatley to, all these guys that we have really talked about today. Just all could be face of the program type guys. So Penn State certainly in a great spot, and that's part of the reason for the hype is that guys like Deny and Singleton and Aller could have left last year, and they kind of seemingly made a pact. I mean, it made sense for all of them, both from playing perspective and personal perspective to a financial perspective, to come back, and we'll see if that all pays off. At number one of those guys that we were just discussing, Nick Singleton. So I know I had Nick number one on my list. You said that you had Deny number one on your list, so you had Nick number two.
Correct.
I had Nick and Catron 1, 2. I couldn't decide between the two.
Fair.
But obviously we had to make one pick, so I just went with Singleton just because of that home run ability. I've always gone back and forth on am I a Nick guy? Am I a Catron guy? I do think that home run ability that Singleton offers, it's just a little bit more fun. But what are we expecting from Singleton? Because I feel like right after his freshman season, the hype around him was crazy, right? He has that massive Rose Bowl game where he has the 87-yard touchdown or whatever it was, and then struggled pretty mightily as a sophomore, was able to break back last year and had a really good junior season. So what are we expecting to see from Nick as a senior?
I will say Singleton's sophomore year, that was the season that Aller's first year. And if you recall, they had absolutely zero deep passing game. They basically put a line of safety right over Singleton and followed him because they knew they weren't going to have to worry about much downfield. So that was kind of how they took away the home run threat. But no, Singleton's just come along. So, he had that big playability his freshman year from the start. I remember the Auburn game. I want to say they played Ohio early in the year, and he had broke off a couple touchdowns. Did the same against Auburn, Maryland. I remember having some. I think it was another game where he had 2 long touchdown runs. But he had that home run ability, but he was a little bit boom or bust. Was not effective in the passing game at all. I don't think they really tried to use him as a receiver, and I think the couple of times I do remember. He had some really bad drops, and then his sophomore year he really came along, and then last year it's almost looks weird like watching him like when they do like line him out deep or he's running like a traditional receiver's route because he's just so big. But he can go up and make a catch, which just it logically doesn't make sense because it just doesn't seem like he should be able to like move like a receiver. But
the one-handed snag against Wisconsin.
But I just cannot believe how well he's progressed as a receiver. So, just the way he sees the field, his improvement as a receiver. He just adds so much to the offense. That the UCLA game, again, Singleton was another guy who was a little dinged up for parts of the season. Wasn't quite 100% for a short stretch. He did miss the UCLA game entirely. That was the only game he missed last year. And that game, Penn State played well. They won 28-11. Could have been 28-3. UCLA scored a touchdown and 2-point version on the very last play of the game, or at least with a few seconds left. But you could really tell the offense just missed that dimension that he brought because he just does so many things so well. And I think he requires so much focus from the defense because he can hurt you in so many ways. The thing that has me most excited to see Singleton this year is you mentioned Drayton earlier, just adding that different perspective to the running backs, maybe seeing some things that weren't addressed before. But apparently he's been working a lot with him on just kind of how to make cuts, how to, avoid tacklers, which I think could result in a lot more big plays because he was one of the guys that, okay, you get him out in the field, open field, he's probably going to be gone. But there were also times where, it looked like he had a chance of breaking one and he would almost like run directly into a safety. So apparently Drayton's been working on him to kind of learn how to, be a little more elusive, how to avoid tacklers a little bit better. And if he can kind of make those cuts, maintain those speed. We've seen a lot of, breakaway runs from Singleton, but he could be, even better with that this year.
Certainly, yeah. No, you raise a good point just about him. Despite the fact that he has that home run ability, it's when he has angles on guys that he's able to, just has so much speed and quickness and power, but not a guy that, a spin move or a juke, not necessarily making guys miss. And is that something that with Drayton and just natural progression as a runner that he can provide now. So.
And I'll just say to anyone watching, go back, if you haven't watched this in a while, go back and just watch the highlights of the Boise State game. I believe it was the last score that kind of iced the game. And there's a good chance Boise State wasn't cover 0 at the time, but it just seemed like he just like exploded through the hole and there was no one anywhere close to him. It was almost like he was like, running against like 3 guys in the offense and they were all like lined up 40 yards behind the ball or something. It was like you just search for defenders as he's like running, like streaking down the center of the field for a touchdown.
He's also one of those guys that some people when they run it like Terrell Pryor, I was just watching Terrell Pryor highlights because they popped up on Twitter today. Like he was such a smooth runner, didn't seem like he was running very fast, but because he had 6'6", he was covering so much ground that he would beat people that way. Singleton's the complete opposite, short, choppy steps, and just you see his legs kick up like crazy. He looks like he's running fast. And he's another guy, credit to him. You had your Deshaun Jacksons in the past of they get to the goal line and they slow down and they toss the ball to the side before they even cross. Singleton is a sprint through the finish line guy. He gets out in the open field. He does not look back and check, is somebody running after me? Let me slow down and jog. no matter what, he's sprinting full speed for the end zone, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're coached to do. No, never look, never. I mean, if you got a lane in front of you, you just run as fast as you can.
Yeah, I
cover
mean, I
as
think
much ground as you can before someone can catch you, and hopefully they won't.
Yeah, well, I think it's simple for him, whereas he knows, hey, if I'm sprinting in the open field, it more likely than not, no one's going to catch me. So let me just sprint the entire time till I get to the end zone. So I've always appreciated that about Singleton, and excited to see him again. It's just crazy in this day and age. Like, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would anyone break Evan Royster's career rushing record? I clearly would have said no at Penn State. Like, it's not going to happen in this day and age of running backs. Like, anyone who plays that much as a running back is probably going to go off to the NFL, not going to stick around for their second year or for their final year. So the fact that Penn State literally has these two guys, came in the same recruiting class, broke out together, and both have stuck around in this era of college football, and now have both had the chance to be Penn State's all-time leading rusher. I would love nothing more, and this is like almost impossible, but if they end both breaking Royster's record and they end with the same amount of yardage, like that would just be.
I hadn't even thought about that because I figure they're probably going to finish 1-2 and they'll be close. But yeah, how great!
Let's get them the same yardage. Come on.
If they both finish with the exact same, tied for number one. Yeah, it's been special to watch those guys just play together last 4 years, be co-starters all this time. I mean, they've from what I understand, they've remained best friends throughout the whole process, basically. And just see just how they kind of unselfishly shared the load for the team and made the offense a lot better, and just how they both bring kind of a different dimension to the offense as well. So it's been a really fun era. Obviously, hopefully they have their curtain call, is really tremendous, and they go out, on a very high note.
Definitely. Let's hope that it ends in Miami. Yes, it's Miami this year. Yeah, it's definitely Miami. It's in the Orange Bowl national championship. So yeah, hopefully they are back there and then walk off the field as champions. All right, that is our top 10. So we have been releasing these on Black Shoe Diaries for the past couple of weeks. We still have Drew, Denai, and Nick to go. So check out our blurbs on them as they are released. You can check out the rest, 4 through 10. They're already posted on the site, so make sure you go and check those out at blackshoediaries.com. As I said a couple different times during the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Helps us out. We're at 211 subscribers right now. Let's get that up to 250 before the beginning of the season, and make sure that you're liking the video as well. Jarrett, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Tim will be back next week. Jarrett will be back as well. Next week, I think we're going to do an over-under podcast or an over-under show on just Penn State specific, different guys, stats that I'm going to come up with myself. No FanDuel, no DraftKings here, just simply my brain. So we'll be back next week. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you then.